Welcome to a short preview of this Screencasts Online video tutorial.
PowerPoint, as most people know, is a Microsoft application, and they've really upped their game lately in terms of functionality, features, and bug fixes. We'll be going through a number of these features today, including touring the interface, creating a presentation from scratch, creating and formatting slides, formatting text and adding pictures and videos, using SmartArt, adding transitions and animations, and then finally we'll switch over to PowerPoint in iOS to look at some presentation features. So I have started up PowerPoint for Mac just by going to the Finder and finding the Applications folder, and then double-clicking on the PowerPoint for Mac icon. So let's have a look at touring a little bit of the interface. When you first open up PowerPoint for Mac, you will see the template chooser, and for our purposes we are just going to choose a blank presentation so that I can show you all the interface elements within the actual application. But before we do that, down the left hand side here we can see a side ribbon, and this gives you various options to sign in and sign out of Office 365. You can create a new presentation directly from the template chooser. You can look at your recent documents, of which I have none because this is the first time I have opened the application. Again, if you're a 365 customer, you may have some shared presentations that you have created here or presentations that other people have shared with you. And then you can click on the Open button down here where you can navigate either through OneDrive, being an O365 customer, or dig into your system folders in the Mac to find your presentation there. So let's go back to the New tab here and click on Blank Presentation and click on Create. So when we open up PowerPoint for the first time, we can see that it's a fairly familiar interface if you've used any sort of Office product before. At the top here, we have our File menu. If I click on this, it'll take me back to the template chooser. I'm just going to close that down again. We have a Save button here. And again, if you're an O365 customer and you save things to OneDrive, this little grayed out area here on the left-hand side allows us to auto-save as we go, a little bit like a Google Doc. You'll be used to seeing a Undo and Redo button here. I tend to use hotkeys, Command Z and Command Y to undo and redo. And then on the left-hand side here, we can search within the presentation for text. Just below that is the Share button if you wanted to share it via email or a O365 link to another person. And then we come to the ribbon. So the ribbon again will be very familiar to people who have used an O365 or Office product before. It is split into various tabs, so let's go through them fairly quickly now.
That's just a quick preview of one of this week's Apple-related tutorials from Screencasts Online. Screencasts Online is your premium source of Apple-related video tutorials. All of our members get access to brand new, up-to-date tutorials each week, as well as unlimited access to our entire video archive full of Mac and iOS-related tutorials. You can stream and download all of our videos on your Mac, iPad and iPhone, and even your Apple TV using the members-only Screencasts Online Apple TV app. Membership also includes a complimentary subscription to the digital Screencasts Online monthly magazine, published each month and packed with videos, articles, reviews, as well as hints and tips covering all aspects of the Mac, iPad, iPhone, and all of the other fantastic Apple products. So, if you're ready to start getting the most out of your Apple devices, visit screencastsonline.com today and become a Screencasts Online member.